Welcome back to the Impact Driven Leader podcast. This is your host, Tyler Dickerhuff. Man, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Thank you for tuning in. If you're a subscriber and this episode hit your library here on this Friday, I'm glad you're listening. If you're listening to a later point, awesome. Excited that you're here. If you're watching on YouTube and you're a subscriber there, thank you so much. One thing, man, I would totally appreciate if you would be a rater or reviewer of this podcast. Let me know how I'm doing. Encourage others to listen. Give me your feedback. Part of that is not validation, whatever else. It's how do I get better? And or how can we spotlight more incredible guests like today, Connor Furu. Connor is an individual that I've actually known for several years, kind of inadvertently in this social media sphere. And we were able to connect. And man, I was excited to have this conversation with him for 2 points. One, the amazing perseverance as a young Gen Z. We're talking a little bit about that. What does the world look like for this new generation of workers? That's one. But two, the impact of leadership in his life, leaders that impacted his life. So many of us listening in, if you're like me, I'm about to turn 44. It's just a number. But I know one of the greatest impacts that I can have, this impact-driven leader, is not only in my work, this is my work, but as well what I can do outside of my work. I'm fortunate to be a soccer coach, and I love coaching in high school age boys now and even a little bit younger, and just seeing them. Recently, I was at a parade in our town, and I happened to see a young man I haven't seen in several years. I coached him when he was probably 10 or 11 years old. Now he's a sophomore in high school. And it was fun to see him and just chat with him and encourage him. And even the look on his face when I saw him and I pointed him out and I yelled to him, "Hey, Rowan," speaks to the volume of what Connor shares here in this episode. The impact that leaders outside of what you do every day can have on people to transform their lives. That's the power of this conversation. Can't wait to be with you at the end and just put a bow on this special conversation with Connor Furu. Connor, man, I'm excited to chat with you. I'm excited to have this conversation. One, because I've enjoyed the conversation we've had so far, as well as we look forward in the lessons that I'm trying to helpfully teach people within this podcast in leadership, your perspective, being one who's been so impacted by high quality leadership, but also having the opinion to say, I don't want to, walk like that. I don't want to be like that, I think is pretty powerful. So that's very open-ended. I'm going to let you kind of dive in and we're going to go wherever you take that prompt and go from there.
Yeah. So, growing up in a single mother home, and I felt like as a young kid looking back now as a, almost 25-year-old guy, I was kind of clawing for leadership. Like I felt like I was metaphorically falling down like a landslide, looking for a root to grab onto, as far as, that father figure in my life. And I found that in the form of my, football coaches. And I should preface this by saying my father was around, but he wasn't necessarily present. And I was looking for that, the strong father figure in my life. Yeah. And, that came in the form of my football coaches, and they were very different in the way they approached their forms of leadership. Maybe vocally, I had another running back coach who was as silent as could be, and he would come over, what you did wrong? Yep. All right, fix it. And, and that was the end of the conversation, but he was a pillar in my life when I was growing up. Mm-hmm. So, I would not be where I'm at to be. I would have never gone on to play Division I football. I would never have the servant mentality that I believe I have if it wasn't for those strong leaders that I had early in life and then throughout my athletic career.
Part of the real kind of premise of this podcast and the work that I aim to empower and help other leaders is figuring out what leadership looks like. There's so often we see different images and pictures of leadership. And you talked about two examples right there. The silent, hey, you know what you did wrong. Great. Pat you on the back. He does whatever, you go do it. And he gives you that nod like, yeah, you figured it out. And then there's the other people who are, more boisterous. They're more outgoing, and each style has their differences. But which piece of each of those do you think you really said, man, I need to endear this. I need to see, exactly what you just said, to be more servant minded now as an adult because of their examples.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's ironic that, I've spoken to high schools, colleges on the podcast with you now and done some others because I was that silent leader type. I mean, throughout my entire high school and college career, although I was a great athlete, I suffered 7 season-ending injuries in college. There, in between my last high school and my first college game was 4.5 years, 1,646 days. And if you've been in a college environment, you know that it's kind of hard to be a vocal leader when you don't, if you aren't like, the guy
Yeah.
on the team.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was very naturally reserved. And throughout my 2 torn ACLs, shoulder reconstruction, COVID canceling a season, and the 1,646 days, like I said, of not playing, I had to get into this mindset of, I'm not going to be the front of the team. I'm not going to be the guy who's on posters. I'm not going to be in the social media edits because I'm just not in that position at this point. And I said, you know what, my role on this team and my leadership will come from not giving anyone else an excuse not to work hard. Like if I'm the hardest working guy on the team, yet having no material, tangible rewards from doing so. No one even knows I'm a college football player outside of my family and my teammates because I wasn't there. But if I could be that guy in the locker room that shows up every day with no promise of any reward, that's where I felt my leadership came. And that ultimately, I didn't know if that was ever going to come to fruition. I didn't know if I was ever going to accomplish that goal until after I played my final game in college. I played 3 college games because of my injuries, as many surgeries as I had games played in college. And then we were at like an after game event, families were hanging out and whatnot. And 2 younger guys came up to me when I was just hanging out with my mom and my sisters, and said that because they had seen what I was gone through, it didn't allow them to give up when they had been injured. One of them had torn their ACL and done some other things. And I was like, in that moment, I was like, I did accomplish my goal. I fit the mold that I put myself in of being the leader because I knew I couldn't be that vocal guy. Yeah. But I think not everyone can be a leader, but everyone, can, find someone to lead. Like, if that makes sense,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would kind of, help you along this say is everyone needs to lead themselves. Yeah. And if we properly lead ourselves, we are going to impact others. If our desire is to lead ourselves the best that we can, which seemingly that's what you did. Yeah. And I think there's a great element of none of us know our circumstances. Mm-hmm. We don't know, you and I both don't know what's going to happen to us tomorrow. But what you just proved that you went through and through my own experiences, it doesn't matter. If I go through it and say, I'm going to give my best effort, none of the rest matters. And if I do so and with the intention of if my best effort is my best effort, it's going to impact someone.
Yeah.
And one thing that I think you mentioned there with those couple young players is none of us know who's looking at us. Mm. And that's kind of part of this as well as leaders, as people in the community, as I coach youth sports and I'm involved in that aspect. One of my great, I guess, aspirations is to, in 10 years after, kids that I've coached are to your age where they look back and they think fondly of a couple of those moments, whatever that may be. And I think the encouragement for, maybe, those listening in that are in maybe a leadership role in their organization or maybe not, man, there are people just like you that need healthy, empowering, supporting leadership all the way around.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing that kind of tests something that you just said, something on my locker in college I had every single day, was Romans 5:3-4, which was not only so, but we glory in our sufferings because suffering produces perseverance, character, and character hope. And so when I was trying to find my leadership role, like leaned on that hope role. I'm like, I don't know if I am, but I hope I'm creating hope for someone else because that's how I made the team better in my mind, was giving someone else hope. That's like, well, Connor's gone through all these injuries, I can get through whatever I'm going through. So, yeah.
So You had shared with me in the past some of your challenges, family life. You talk about the season ending injuries. As we jump forward, kind of maybe in your college career and now post college, the impact that those coaches, those leaders that you've seen, how have they continued to impact your life, whether it's the way you carry yourself, the way you go about your day, that, kind of continues to impact you? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that or your thoughts there.
Yeah, and so I think it's all about paying tribute to those people that invested in me. You know, I, I was writing in my journal not too long ago, and sometimes just when my wheels start turning, I just start writing, and see what comes out. And something that came out was, "I am who I am because of those who came before me, and I will be who I'm capable of becoming for all those who come after." And so it's like it's paying tribute to those people that invest in you along the way, and so grateful. Um, because having my football coaches that became, my pillars in my life, I know the statistics of the like not having a masculine or father figure in the home, where it's you're 4 or 5 times more likely to commit a sexually violent crime, more likely to drop out of high school, more like all of these crazy statistics. And my mother was a very strong-willed woman. I never thought I'd go down. I don't think I'd go down the routes like I just said. But having those strong figures in my life made sure that I had something to emulate. I had something to go after, and seeing the opposite of the guys who I've played with or the other people who have surrounded myself in life go in the other direction, because they, in my example earlier, my metaphor earlier about going down a landslide, just trying to find a route, like they didn't find that route and, ended up in, prison or, worse. And so, I'm you can't take lightly just having like a stable, strong, whether it be your mother, your father, coach, teacher, friend. Like I think we take that for granted. And I want to be who I'm capable of becoming to represent those people and all those who invested in me.
So one of my beliefs coming out of the COVID pandemic is, and something I recognize, is that we're seeing a generational change, and it's been identified in workplaces where, now Gen Z, your generation, the right now, the 18 to 25-year-olds in the workforce are coming in greater and greater numbers. And, 10 years ago, 5 to 7 years ago, it was more of, now they're millennials in the workforce. How do we deal with this? And a leadership from an older generation is like, oh, they're different. They have different ideas and thoughts. I'd love for you to just kind of, share a little bit as you're now in the workforce, or, teammates of yours, classmates of yours, share some of the challenges you're seeing in regards to the leaders that are leading in business, and, kind of how you view that in regards to, all right, man, they're doing a great job of meeting my needs here, or man, this is what I'm looking for and I'm just not finding it.
Yeah. I believe that, all looking at the guys I played with, people who I'm connected with, a lot of them happen to be, former athletes, and which I think there's a reason why people look to hire athletes, right? Is because of that, the mentality that they bring, which I think in the participation trophy age that, we find ourselves in, it's becoming more and more rare to find, people who are okay with it, like adversity, okay with the frustrations that come with, whether it be, you can relate to athletics, like coming into college, going from you're the best player in high school. Now you're, small fish in a big pond, and seeing that influx of people from college who, felt like they might've been the greatest thing walking on campus, to now they're in a company of, a few hundred people, few thousand people. And it's like, dude, you're a number. You got to make your name for yourself. Mm-hmm. And I think that's such a valuable trait that it is, that in my mind is becoming less and less prominent.
Okay. So, in your experiences now, and think about it, it's not naming, pointing people out, but what things have you seen that are like, man, this is what I need. This is what I need in regards to filling my needs as, as you view the world now, right? Mm-hmm. You view the world in your 25-year-old eyes, think about share the thoughts the feelings that you have from different leaders, and that could be coaches you've had the last few years, or like, man, they missed the mark. They were trying to be like this. That's not what I'm looking for in life. Those aren't my desires and aspirations. And speaking more of, not specifically yourself, but those around you.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, when I think of someone missing the mark, it almost always has to do with in my belief, a lack of gratitude or a lack of perspective. I'm blessed that, throughout my athletic career, I believe God provided me football as a vessel to learn some of the greatest, lessons in life. And during my junior year of college, I traveled internationally to India to do some work in a safe house for young girls who had been rescued from human trafficking. And I think, especially in the U.S. or other first world countries, there's a lack of perspective that there's 850 million people in the world who don't have clean water. If you make the poverty line in the U.S., you are in the top 4% in the entire world financially. And there's this overwhelming, I think, I don't want to say it's a pandemic or epidemic or anything, but I think it's a lack of perspective of the how good we have it and how we take it for granted. And that goes back to what I was saying before, like becoming who I'm capable of becoming for all those who come after, and also for those who didn't have the same advantages that I did. Like, I had a great childhood, although I did have a lot of adverse things happen to me, and a lot of stuff that I believe created me who I am. In the grand scheme of things, I mean, I've seen 8-year-olds and to 20-year-olds who had spent most of their lives being sexually trafficked. Like, I'm pretty blessed, comparatively. And people sometimes need to take a step back, I believe, from their own lives and say, you know what, I'm going to continue to advance my life, but I'm in a pretty good position, regardless of how hard it may be.
Yeah.
So yeah.
One thing that you share there, and kind of whether it's the gratitude perspective, and this is why I've gathered through my own kids or younger, I mean, 16, 15, 13, but yet still in this mindset of it's very outward centric. It's, if I look back at generations, I think back even myself, it was, how do I get mine? Like, let me go out, let me accomplish, let me get mine, have my little piece of the world. And I see continually where that's not a priority. That's not a priority for the example you just said. And I think social media, I think the awareness of the rest of the world has created this idea that, oh, okay, yes, I have these opportunities, but man, how do I create more of an impact by helping those other places? How do I go experience the world? And so as I think about that as a leader, I think it would be wrong if I came to you and said, hey, Connor, how can I help you make more money? How can I help get more? Instead of coming to you and say, hey, Connor, I appreciate you shared the story one time about you being in India. Man, if we were to do something organizationally that supported that, would that be a passion, a driver of yours? And without putting words in your mouth, it seems to me that is more of a driver than saying, hey, here's how you make an extra $100,000, as far as a facet.
Yeah, I mean, I've had career changes. Like, even though I'm only, almost 25 years old, like, I was offered a raise in my pay, and I quit the job because I knew that it wasn't going to allow me to be to do the things that fulfill me and make me who I want to become. And, yes, you need money. You need money to keep food on the table and a roof over your head. But ultimately, if you're not doing what in your heart is the right thing to do, then I don't know what to tell you. Like, I thought, like, if I accepted that bump in pay, it was going to make it just dig, one more hole. It was going to take longer to get out. Yeah. And it would have kept me in there longer. So, yeah. I mean, I think people need to realize and be very clear in what their motives are in life. And that's why whenever I speak to high schools, I always say being mission oriented over goal oriented. Yeah. And so goals are necessary. You need them. You need to, have incremental things to gauge your success. But at the same time, I've spoken at high school before. It's like, who wants to go to the NFL, right? And, kids raise their hand. It's like, okay, well, why you want to do that? And a lot of them, could say, I want to take care of my family. I want to, move out of this situation, right? Okay, tomorrow you have a career-ending injury, right? You're fine, like physically you're all good, but you can never play football again. Was that only contingent on you doing that athletically?
Yeah.
And so being mission oriented is as this is what I'm going to do. And if this facet or like athletically doesn't work out, then I got to hammer down on my business. I got to hammer down on whatever that, that may be.
I love that perspective. And I think quite honestly is, we've chatted a little bit before. I think that's the real aha moment that I think you probably had. As I'm sitting here, we're listening to you and thinking about our conversations is, you described kind of much yourself, right? You had those injuries and the perseverance that you've mentioned before, the resilience to say, I just got to keep doing the work. Yeah. Something's going to happen at some point if I just keep doing the work. And I see this and luckily from my mentors, if I think of John Maxwell for one, he's kind of like, goals are a great finish line. That's it. And if you want to run through a ticker tape, great. But if you're using that to justify your life, you're going to get there and you're going to be disappointed. It needs to be more stair step where that goal is just now the floor for the next step. And that's what I hear from you is kind of this understanding that it needs to be mission driven, something much, much bigger. It's not, hey, how can we meet this sales number? How can we, reach a championship in our team or win the league? And it's like, but what for? Like, what are we really trying to accomplish? And I think that's something that I'm gathering from you. And I think that your perspective from all the different adversities between high school, family, college, so forth and so on has really conditioned you to understand, man, I can't have these, finite goals because if it's no longer possible, what do I do then?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, think about it like this, like, I don't know, back in middle school, I went through this weird phase where I loved mountains, right?
Okay.
Like just a weird phase.
Western Washington, I get it, close to Mount Rainier. Yeah, okay.
But say you climb Mount Everest, right? You get to the summit and it's a terrible day, can't take a picture, whatever. It's not how you thought it was going to be. You still climb Mount Everest.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you don't get the photo, it wasn't like this beautiful scenic thing that you had in your mind. Like, are you going to, dilute the whole experience because the ending destination wasn't what you had, pre-constructed in your mind? It's like you still did all these things. It just, you did a disservice to the journey it took to get up there just because you were so fixated on what it was going to look like. And if there's one thing I've learned in my short, 24, almost 25 years is that like you make a plan, like hear God laughing, because we are not on this timeline that we constructed in our heads. We are not, that's not going to play out the way it is. And so, like I said, you still climb Mount Everest just because it doesn't look how you predestined in your head.
Well, I mean, I think that's great for you to share. Again, thinking about all those injuries and the resilience that it took and the people that are probably told you to say, Connor, just give up. Like, come on, dude, it's not going to happen. What was the biggest driver for you through all of that? You mentioned a little bit, being the example, having that hope, but why did you, when you're going through the PT and the physical therapy after each one of those surgeries and injuries, what drove you to say, no, this is the path I need to follow?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it shifted and kind of altered throughout the, the timeline of everything. So early on, I was told by my father who, suffered from substance abuse, as did, virtually all my father's side of my family. My uncle died of alcoholism. My grandfather suffered from it. My other uncle has, like, it's ingrained in my bloodline at this point. And well, up until me. But throughout that time, my father, when I was growing up, told me to change my name. And I found that for whatever reason, I don't know, as an 8-year-old kid, you don't know why your dad's telling you this, right? But I found that recognition on the football field from external sources. I realized I was good at this thing and I was getting that, external validation. And so that kept me going for a while. But then that caused me to view myself solely as a football player. Like if I didn't have this thing, then I didn't want to be anything else. I was actually talking to a friend recently, and he's like, everyone still loved you on the team, like during college, you just didn't play. I'm like, yeah, but I didn't. People didn't love me for what I wanted to be loved for.
Yeah.
And that was a hard thing to overcome. And so for a while throughout high school and everything, it was if I wasn't valued as a football player, I didn't want to be valued for anything. And so then after I tore my ACL, September 30th, 2016, I made a promise to my coach. And when I say family, I mean that vaguely. The people who invest in me. Whenever I say family, that is a vague term.
Yeah.
And I made a promise that they'd see me play again. And to me, that was the largest promise I'd ever made in my life. And I knew that I needed to give everything I had to this promise. And by doing so, whether I completed it or not, it would make it virtually impossible for me to not make good on promises later in life, to my children, to my spouse, to my, my family. And so did I know it was going to take 4.5 years and, 2 knee surgeries, a shoulder surgery, a canceled season due to COVID, and, the broken hand, I didn't know. But at the end of it all, that was my driver of, I need to fulfill this promise to my family in order to become whatever it is I'm supposed to become.
Mm-hmm.
And on my first collegiate game, I was on punt team. I had 2 shoulder braces on, knee brace. I was stiff as a board playing, but I was on punt team. I go down to cover a punt and I made a solo tackle on the opposite sideline. And I get up and I look over to our sideline and everyone's just going ballistic. It wasn't a big hit. It wasn't like a crazy tackle, or anything. I didn't force a fumble. Everything's going crazy, not because of what the play was. It was because of what went into it. And I always say when I go to speak anywhere is that everything I prayed for didn't come true. The 100-yard games, the external validation from the social media, or all that stuff that so many young athletes crave. Nothing I prayed for came true, but everything I should have been praying for did. And I got, instead of 100-yard games, I got 100, of my best friends who were crying seeing me make a single tackle, who had invested in me and made me, realize that worth and that value that I had been seeking for so long, that I was more than just this football player. And after my last game in college, most guys, are crying, bawling. It was it's the last time they'll ever play because, so few go on to play after. And I wasn't like that. I was at peace. Because I knew everything that had happened. I'd given everything. I was exhausted. I cried enough along the way.
Well, there's a couple thoughts there. You mentioned the value of a promise, and really, I think making a promise to ourselves, and wherever that may be. And again, from a twist this to be leadership perspective, it's like people deserve better. So make that promise that you can be better. Be the better you, because everyone else is going to be served. You were a testament to that. You're like, all right, I'm going to just do better. I'm going to commit. I don't know what that's going to show up as, but it was an example to other kids going through the same thing. The other piece that I really took away, and this comes back, I think it's generational. I think there is some tremendous value in it. It's relationships over metrics. You mentioned having everyone on the sideline, 100 players on the sideline cheering for you instead of a 100-yard game. That's a value and understanding of relationships. And I think that is a societal change. Your generation, a previous guest, Nate Chatfield, talked about how all of his soccer players, they're just overwhelmed by social media. And you mentioned that in that piece of being that social media star or being recognized. And that can be so challenging for people. And it's like, no, realizing that's not the real point. It's like, how can we have better relationships? And I think as an older, generation or people listening in, and in my age, we kind of understand that. You go a little bit older, they don't get that because they've never had challenges to relationships. I think back you sharing about being COVID or being at times disconnected from the team. They're traveling, you're not. You're in the, PT room, they're out, on the field doing whatever. That disconnection, to me, probably ingrained the value of relationships more than just checking something off a list as an accomplishment, a metric. Is that feel right? Is that what you experienced? Is that
Oh, I mean, 100%. I mean, looking back on it, I believe as much as I appreciate all the people that I was surrounded with, whether it be my trainers, my teammates, my coaches, everyone who invested in me and I have just lifelong relationships with, I believe looking back deprived myself of so many moments because I was so um I was so infatuated with my own self-pity. And
I
at
got it.
times like I
Yeah.
deprived myself of so many memories. Although I pride myself on my ability to remember small things because I now I value that so much, just little things that
Yeah.
people normally wouldn't remember, like little nuances of memories. Like I know one example. It was after my second torn ACL in college. I had tore my ACL my second practice on campus. I retore it, and it was that winter. We were going through winter workouts. I was sitting down on the court that we were doing some like circuit training
Mhm.
on. And after everyone got done training, I was, just had my head down, just kind of, doing whatever. And you get the I'm sorry's. The I'm sorry's are the worst thing, right? It's I feel so bad for you. It's like, yeah, well, you just reminded me that I'm in a
Yes.
place like worth pity, right? But there was one moment where I just see like a fist like come into like my line of sight as like my head down, like not a punch, but like just like to
Yeah.
give me knocks,
Yep.
right? And I didn't look up to see who it was, but it was that moment where it's just like that was in that moment enough recognition that it's like, dude, I see that you're here. You're still
Hmm.
part of this team, right? And I like to pride myself of those little moments because I was so self infatuated with my depression or my whatever I was struggling with at that time. And so yeah, that those little things along the way are just so valuable. And
Yeah.
I might have gone off topic there for a second, but
No.
yeah,
Well, again, I think that just re-emphasizes from a leadership position, and there's one through line. It's the value of relationships.
yeah,
Those people that invested you early in life, those people that invested in you when you were down and out, the people that invested in you so much that you made a promise to continue to drive. But then also, you mentioned the flip side of that is when you were too fixated on yourself that you didn't make those memories, you didn't see those other people, and I think that's where I've been that in life. I've been
yeah,
so fixated and intense just to push through that I pushed myself away from others.
yeah,
And I hear that a little bit in yourself too, as I push people away because I'm going to get through this. And what I also take from this and again, trying to analyze is as people, as society, we've grown to understand you can have all the toys, you can have all the zeros, you can have all the commas. But if you don't have people around you that care about you, that support you, that encourage you, you're going to be miserable.
yeah,
Absolutely miserable. And I think as a generation, they've said that the millennials will be the wealthiest generation ever. And, if you look then to Gen Z, may even eclipse that. But yet, I believe the desire, as I listen to people like you, as I listen to people others, it has nothing to do with money. It is where are we going to be wealthy in relationships? Where are we going to be wealthy in experiences? And where are we going to be wealthy in mission? Those are the things that I'm sitting here, I'm listening, that I'm learning, and I want to go. And when I go, help coach my son's,
yeah,
soccer match right after this, what am I going to be talking to the players about? This. Hey,
yeah,
just leave it behind. You guys could not be here tomorrow. Just take it all in and realize what you're doing right now as 14 and 50-year-olds on a pursuit to go win a national championship. Don't get so fixated on you and
yeah.
what you might accomplish. Look at the guys around you and then just realize the value in the lessons. That's what's sinking into my heart.
Yeah. Well, and I think a revelation that I had when I've got the chance to travel, and being in India and seeing that these people they've never seen a football game in their life, like and for me like I was a small Division I school athlete, right? Like that trip made me realize there's 8 billion people on this earth who have no idea and neither do they care that I'm an
Yep.
athlete,
Yep.
right? And even taking that a step further, look at the Tom Brady's of the world. There might be 3 billion people who don't know who he is nor care, You know, like even
Yeah.
as big of that athlete is, it's like in those moments, I wasn't an athlete. I wasn't a football player. I was just a human, you know?
On Tom Brady's note, there are kids out there wearing Tom Brady shirts when he didn't win a Super Bowl. I mean,
Yeah.
it's funny how those things happen. So they might know who he is simply for that, but not what he accomplished.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
No, 100%. And I think the big shift for me, just perspective wise, how I approached life in general. Of, you know, I'm going to give everything I have to football because I love it, but I I'm not going to say I didn't suffer from some mental, you know, severe mental issues after that, but I was able to cope with the struggles I went through better because I'm like, you know what, I'm not the main character.
Yeah. There you go.
You know, it's like I'm going to give
Yeah.
everything I have to this, and if it works out great, but if not, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like what's the next thing? You know.
Connor, thank you so much, man. Thank you for being the light that you are shining in the world and just the example of resilience. And you know, I really appreciate again you sharing and like I mentioned a few moments ago, the lessons that I'm taking away from this, I appreciate tremendously. So thanks again for being here, man.
Appreciate it. It's great.
All right. One of the greatest pieces that Connor shares, in my opinion, is the dedication. That's it. It's dedicated, it's perseverance, it's resilience, dedication to the process and learning. But here's the other piece. As he shared about his teammates after he made the tackle, cheering for him on the sideline. I know that he shared that isn't why he did it. And everyone else knew that. And that's why they were cheering. See, he was, as I heard from him, dedicated to the commitment. I will fulfill the promise that I made to myself and to others. And as leaders, I think we can't underestimate the character that is exemplified when we commit and follow through with our promises. It's the promise simply of saying, I will get up and rise again no matter what. That resilience, that drive that so often we question, does our society still have? There's great examples of it. And it's spotlighting a example of like that in Connor, but also the opportunity we as leaders have to impart and impact others. That's why I do what I do. It's not for me. It's to spotlight people like Connor and so many others, recently Nate, Hannah, who make a difference in lives because they're willing to stand there and say, hey, we can do this. I want to encourage you. I want to cheer for you. Not because you need cheered for. It's because you're doing something that is meaningful as I see it. That's our great opportunity as impact-driven leaders, is to help others in that process. Thanks again for tuning in. As always, I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to bring stories like Connor's and to take a perspective and take this as a leadership adage that we can all learn and grow and get better from. It's a challenge that I thoroughly love and enjoy. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that. Till next time, have a good one.